Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone. I welcome you all to this class. I'm Dr. Bhanupriya Rohila, and today in this class, as discussed earlier, we will be discussing the other two poems written by William Blake, which are a part of the second unit of the syllabus. The title of the first poem is The Chimney Sweeper, which portrays the condition of the child laborers in the 18th century England. The poem is in two parts, and first we shall discuss both the parts of the chimney sweeper, and then we'll move on to the second poem, A Poison Tree. Just like the poem Holy Thursday, which we discussed in the previous lecture, this poem is also found in both the volumes by Blake, which are Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. But the two poems are different in their expression. This is because the two volumes are different in nature and are set in different tones and moods. Therefore, the two different poems also reflect two different dispositions. So the first poem, The Chimney Sweeper, which was published in Songs of Innocence, has the utterances of an innocent mind of a child. Whereas the other poem with the same title, published in Songs of Experience, accounts the thoughts of a child only, but this time living amidst the hardships, he has gained some experience, some understanding of the world around. And thus, though he is still young, but not inexperienced. Thus, the two poems are different but go well together and give a full picture of the contrasting ideas. As we have already discussed the poet in detail in the last class, so we will not be repeating that here. And now let's begin with the first poem, The Chimney Sweeper, published in 1789 in the volume Songs of Innocence. Here is the illuminated and engraved text of the poem, which is done by William Blake only. And before we go ahead with the text, let us first understand the background of the poem so that it will be easier for you all to comprehend the depth of the narrator's words, which are apparently very simple in the poem. Here we have this image of a chimney sweeper young boy whose appearance says a lot about his work and his condition. So, who were chimney sweepers? The answer to this question is that chimney sweepers were basically the ones who used to clean the soot from the flues of the chimneys. But why children? So, we have a longer answer for this. During the Industrial Revolution, coal was used as the major fuel, which would emit sticky soot. And if that soot piles up and if not removed, there could erupt fire anytime. So this became a necessity for all the buildings, houses, church, everywhere, wherever there were chimneys. The smaller interiors of houses and the even smaller sizes of flues made it quite a task for the young children of around 5 to 10 years old, since they only could enter those narrow passages. But their living conditions were very poor. These young children were often either homeless orphans or were sold by their impoverished parents and used to work as apprentices under a senior sweep who would train them and give them food and shelter. This apprenticeship was legalized by an agreement, and thus these children were indentures and were no less than slaves. The poorly fed children were mostly poorly treated too and exploited by the master sweeps. They would sleep in small cellars in the same soot-clawed clothes which they used during the work. The claustrophobic, dark, suffocating, soot-filled and sometimes very hot flues were so narrow that often the children would be jammed inside it. Sometimes they fell down and got badly injured, and sometimes died too. Thus, the job was quite dangerous and sometimes proved deadly too. Most of the children could not survive long and ended up having several health problems, including lung congestion and other respiratory issues due to the soot and smoke, skin diseases, eye problems, deformities, and many others. Many of these young orphaned children were the responsibilities of the parish workhouses, and the parish union allowed apprenticeship to enable the children to learn the skill. However, the poorly governed system proved horrible to these young children. It continued throughout the Romantic and the Victorian eras, and after multiple amendments by the Parliament, the Chimney Sweeper and Chimney Regulation Act 1840 illegalized the Chimney Sweeping Act by anyone under the age of 21. There is an essay, The Praise of Chimney Sweepers, by another Romantic writer, Charles Lamb, who talks about them very poignantly and compassionately. And then there is also a novel by a Victorian writer, Charles Dickens, who wrote about the chimney sweepers and their life conditions. The novel was named as Oliver Twist. So in that novel, Dickens portrays the chimney sweepers quite realistically. So I suggest the students to read the novel to know more about them and their conditions, how in the genre of fiction they have been portrayed. So I gave this account so that the students get a very holistic picture of who were chimney sweepers and why the writers wrote about them. Now, let us begin with the text of the poem The Chimney Sweeper by Blake. The first stanza of the poem reads as, "When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, 'Weep, weep, weep, weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. So here the narrator tells the reader the tragic incident of his life and says that he lost his mother at quite a young age, and after that his father sold him. He was too young to even speak properly, and here he does the job as chimney sweeper and sleeps in soot. So we can understand here that the poem is being narrated by a young child who is abandoned by his father, most probably due to poverty. And the child is now an apprentice. As we have discussed already, that the young children of 5 to 10 were most suitable for this job, and hence the child was forced into this. The hardships started very early in his life, and thus his miserable childhood, devoid of any fun and joy, was the only thing with him to be accounted herewith. He uses the word weep, 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 weep. So we see here that the word begins with an apostrophe, which means he is referring to the word sweep, which he was not able to utter properly yet. So it was the time when the master sweeps and also the apprentices would go to the streets and shout out weep, weep to get the clients, since it was a very common thing to be done in every household then. So the letter S would go silent, and the remaining word was the only audible thing then. So here he talks about that and says that he cleans their chimneys and sleeps in soot. It again explains the times and the adverse living conditions of such children who were kept in dirty small cellars where the children would sleep amidst the soot bags, since the soot they used to scratch from the chimneys was supposed to be collected by the children in soot bags, since the soot further used to be sold by the sweep masters. The bags used to be stockpiled in the same room where the children slept. So he highlights here his suffering that they bear on a daily basis. Now let's move on to the next stanza. Stanza number 2, that goes as: There's little Tom Dacre who cried when his head, that curled like a lamb's back, was shaved. So I said, Hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head is bare, you know that the soot cannot spoil your white hair. Here, in this stanza, he introduces another character named Tom Dacre. So this Tom is another little child who probably is also homeless and is now a new apprentice there. He has had lamb-like curly hair, and his head has just been shaved. It was a common thing to do to the apprentices that their heads used to be shaved so that the sticky soot would not stick to their hair, keeping in mind the fact that the condition of hygiene and cleanliness was pathetic. So the young little boy is crying, and the child narrator tells him not to cry because the soot will not spoil his beautiful hair now. Here, the little boy finds it difficult to lose his hair and lacks affection. The narrator tries to pacify him and to convince him to accept this, by finding something positive in it, that it will not spoil the beauty of the hair now. Here, one thing is important to note, that the child's hair, Blake has compared with lamb's hair. And again, I repeat that the lamb is the symbol of innocence and purity. And it also has the religious significance that Christ is also represented by this symbol. So here, the loss of lamb's hair signifies the beginning of the loss of his innocence by his entry into the world of adversities. So, from here, he will learn to have experiences of the world. Now, let's read the third stanza that says, "And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was a-sleeping, he had such a sight, that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black." This stanza has some dark undertones. The little boy Tom, after losing his hair and losing any optimism, remained quiet after that. And while asleep, he saw a vision. The dream had thousands of chimney sweepers in it. Dick, Joe, Ned and Jack, to name a few. And they were all locked up in coffins. This very image shows the scarred psyche of the child who sees all the sweepers in coffins. And to be precise, coffins of black. So the darkness of their soot-filled rooms and smoke-filled chimneys is no less than coffins. And their life is as good as death, since the death of their childhood is already there. But there is also, but this also here it implies that the vision is suggesting to death, which was quite common in chimney sweepers in those days. Since the job used to be so dangerous, most of the children would not survive long. Thus, the dream shows him what is there in his subconscious mind. And he sees all his fellow apprentices dying in the soot, and they are all locked up in it with their agreement and bound to live in those dark, gloomy cellars that are as good as coffins made of this soot only. One can see the miseries, pain, fears and hopelessness of such children through the dream of this child, Tom Dacre. Now, let's proceed further with the next stanza, that is stanza number 4, which reads as, "And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river, and shine in the sun." Here, the narrator explains Tom's dream further, and he says that in the same vision, he sees an angel who comes there with a bright key in his hand, and using the key, he opens the coffins and all the sweepers are freed from it. And outside the coffins, they now see the green plains where they play and laugh, and there is a river where they bath and shine in the sun. Here in this stanza, the angel comes as a ray of hope to him. The angel is a messenger to God, and the little boy thinks that the God only, by sending his angels, will help these children come out of those coffins. So once the angel sets them free, the young children find themselves in a different setting. Unlike the dark, claustrophobic, dirty cellar and the smoke-filled city, they are all in a green surrounding, where the river is there, the sun is shining, and very much like that of a countryside full of natural landscape, where the children can act quite naturally and can enjoy their childhood with carefree laughter and play. Here he dreams of washing in river, and as we know that the chimney sweeper apprentices did not get to bathe every day. It was very rare with them to have it, so their skins were always under the black of soot. They never shone like the other children. So this very stanza beautifully portrays the hidden desires of every chimney sweeper boy. The next stanza is also in line with the same as the previous one. It says, "The naked and white, all their bags left behind. They rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he would be a good boy, he would have God for his father and never want joy." So the same thought continues in this stanza as well. Here he continues to say that the children out of the coffins, out in the green landscape, leaving their bags behind, they would enjoy themselves. And thereafter, the angel tells Tom that if he would be a good boy, the angel would be with his father, and he would always enjoy. Here the poet uses the word white in contrast with the black coffin, which is indirectly the black suit under which the children always look black. Their light of life is hidden under that darkness. In the dream, the children also leave their suit bags behind. So during those times, basically, the children would always carry heavy suit bags. And the burden of those bags never made them feel carefree and light. And once without them, they rise upon clouds and play. However, the last two lines of the stanza, the angel assures the boy that if he behave in a proper way, if he is a good boy, so here by being good, he means that if he performs his duties without any complaints and without any grievances, the angel would always be supported by God, and his father would always enjoy. He would never lack or he would never want joy. Here, lack means the scarcity. That means he would never be devoid of joy. And the innocent and religious boy, so this child finds inspiration to continue his work and correlates the hope of freedom and happiness in religion. Moving on to the next and the last stanza, the narrator says, "And so Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark, and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm." This concluding stanza dwells upon the impact of the vision on the child. And the narrator says that Tom awakes from the dream and he gets ready for the work with their bag and brush. The morning was cold, but Tom was warm and happy. So out of the dream, the child is back to the real world full of darkness, and very readily all of the children, they get ready to go for work with their things. The narrator realizes that it was very cold outside, and usually anybody, especially a child, would grumble over it if he is forced to go for work outside in such a cold weather. But Tom, after the dream, was happy and was feeling warmth in his heart. The last line of the stanza comes as a moral message to all and explicates that if all the children do their duties properly, they need not fear any harm or problems. So the ending shows that now he develops acceptance for his fate and his life, and the fact that he performs all his duties, that is what is expected of him and what is being said to him by the master sweep. If he does all that, he would not be punished, and even his father, who he has lost already, would also be happy. This very inculcation used to be done by the church then. Thus, this simple-looking poem of 6 quatrains rhyming A, B, B in content depicts the dark and difficult life of chimney sweeper little boys. The degraded capitalist society that deprives these children of their childhood and exploits them. The corrupt and unmindful system shows the dark aspect of development and modernism. The innocence of the children is remarkable here. Although most of the poems by Blake in the volume Songs of Innocence have light and happy themes, but this poem does not seem to have a very happy theme. We can say that the child Tom is finally happy, but his happiness is just an illusion and is limited to his performance of his duties. The first stanza gives a brief about how the apprentices come into this work. They are already aggrieved souls who have either lost their parents or have been sold out, and thereafter their miseries are endless. The second stanza marks the arrival of a new apprentice who is being prepared for his training as a chimney sweeper, and for this his head is shaved so that it improves his efficiency at work. He sees a horrifying dream which is nothing but his fears hovering his mind, as he knows the fate of chimney sweepers. And the next 2 stanzas talk about his desperate desire to be liberated and to return to the pastoral life where he can enjoy life again. Here one can draw the contrast between the dark, gloomy, dirty, smoky city and the green fields of the idyllic settings. And the last stanza talks about how he convinces himself by accepting his fate. The last stanza also has another implied meaning when he says that if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. To read it the other way, it means that if they don't do their duties, they would be harmed. So it probably suggests the violence and punishments that the chimney sweepers had to bear in case of not performing their jobs well. And the child believes that God would send angels to save him if he does his duties, and probably he considers this as a way of salvation. Here, the religious undertones are very much visible and subtle. This was all about the poem The Chimney Sweeper from the Songs of Innocence. And now let's proceed to the next part of the same poem, which was published in 1794 under the volume Songs of Experience. So here we have seen the engraving of this poem that was published in Songs of Experience. And now let's begin with the stanza number 1. So the first stanza reads as, "A little black thing among the snow, crying, weep, weep in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother? Say, they are both gone up to the church to pray." So here the first stanza of this poem also begins with the background of the child's hardships. The narrator talks about a little black thing among the snow, which is nothing but a little boy or a young chimney sweeper. And his existence is nothing better than a thing, an object. So here, among the white snow, the boy smeared with soot makes it quite a spot. He is calling out to get some work of cleaning. His voice is sorrowful, and one can easily understand the reason of the grief. It is very cold outside as the snow is falling. We can see the picture of the plate with the poem engraved, which has an image of a boy with a soot bag on his shoulder and he's standing in the snow. So the colder it is, the more heat is required in the houses, and thus the use of chimney gets increased. So even in such a weather, the children continue their work. This boy is asked about his father and mother, and in response to this, he says that they have gone to the church to pray, which means that his parents are under the influence of church, which means he is targeting here the whole religion. The reason why he says this might be that in those times, the church used to run workhouses where the orphan, abandoned, homeless, and the other needy people would stay. And the church would provide them work so that they could feed themselves and not be completely dependent on the church itself. So here, in this line, he suggests that the child's parents have gone to pray and have sold him to the church to live like this. Now, the next stanza reads as, "Because I was happy upon the heath and smiled among the winter's snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe." Again, here the narrator, we know that the narrator is a chimney sweeper boy. So he says, recollecting his past when he would live in a countryside on some green landscape, that because he was happy on the heath, so heath is the green field here, and smiled among the winter's snow. Here we see a stark difference between the two times. His present also has snow in which he feels quite unhappy. And in his past, when he saw snow, he would feel happy and he would smile in that. So here he says because he did all that is the parents, they clothed me in the clothes of death. The clothes of death are his black clothes full of soot and darkness. And here it also implies that clothes are used to cover us, and here what covers the boy is unhappiness or the darkness, which is no less than death. And he further says that they taught him to sing the notes of woe. Their life was so miserable and their hearts were so agonized that the only music that they could sing was that of sorrow and pain. On one hand, the child was happy living upon the heath, and on the other, he is mourning over his condition now. Then, in the last stanza, he says, "And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury, and are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery." Now, the child rationalizes his thoughts here and says that because he is happy, so he means to say that he looks happy, and he dances and sings because he is a child. They think they have not done any wrong to him. So he has complaints for them, but he also tries to defend them by saying that they think they have not done any injustice to the child. And they have further gone to praise the God and his priest. So he takes the whole organized religion in fold here and to praise King who rules over the country. He believes that the parents have done something unknowingly, and they think religion and the ruler are there to save them. He goes on to say that his parents have gone to praise them who make up a heaven of our misery. Now, this concluding line very explicitly shows that the child is full of anger, but he is helpless, and he knows something that even his parents do not know. So he accuses the two highest authorities who are running the whole system of living comfortably by exploiting the underprivileged masses. So to conclude, we here find that unlike the previous poem published in the volume Songs of Innocence, the child now has gained some knowledge of the world. And now he is not innocent to believe in the philosophy of salvation by working hard, which is offered by the religion. But now he is experienced enough to understand the corruption of the church as well as of the king. The ironical and sarcastic tone of the poem suggests the shattered faith of the child in the organized religion and the ruler. Basically, it is a reflection over the condition of the world full of binaries between the privileged and the underprivileged, the provider and the labor, the capitalists and the poor. They are powerful, but they are negligent of their painful condition. So Blake here tries to highlight the corruption of the institutions. He suggests that how most of the people are like this little boy's parents who have blind faith in these religious institutions that simply lay down the doctrines and principles. but they are just their spuriousness and deceptiveness. The exploitation has taken away the children's childhood. It would deprive them of their youth and freshness as well. And the unfortunate people fail to see what a child can easily perceive with the wisdom he has gained after living a dejected life as apprentice. His belief in religion and spirituality is not same as it was before. So here we put an end to this poem. I believe it was easy to follow. Thank you. In this part of the lecture, we shall now discuss another poem by William Blake. And the title of the poem is A Poison Tree, which was published in Songs of Experience. This is a very small poem, but it's a beautiful poetic piece. And personally, I really appreciate this, as this was a part of my syllabus in school. Written in a very simple language, it is like a nursery rhyme that can be sung in a sing-song manner. But the content is very grave and gives a very strong moral message. The poem talks about how a person's emotions, when suppressed, can overpower his conscience. Here is the engraving of this poem by Blake. Let's begin with the first stanza. It says, I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. So here the speaker narrates an incident when he was angry with his friend. He told his wrath, so wrath is anger. So he talked about his anger to his friend, and his rage vanished thereafter. But thereafter he got angry with his foe, which means an enemy. So when he got angry with his enemy, he did not tell about it to him. And as a consequence, his anger grew even more. So here the feeling of vengeance comes into being. We can see the parallel drawn here, and the speaker has similar feelings for both the persons, the friend and the enemy, but he chooses a different treatment for both. Here one interesting thing to note is that all the lines begin with I here. So we can see that the I, which generates ego, is very important to the narrator. And this ego is playing a significant role here. And structurally, the poet uses anaphora, that is the repetition of a word or phrase in the beginning of each line. The next stanza reads as, and I watered it in fears, night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft, deceitful wiles. So he admits very honestly here that he watered it in fears. So this it is referring to the wrath here. So he watered his wrath in fears. and with his tears day and night. Fear of the enemy and tears of the painful incident which must have induced this antagonism in him. He also sunned it or maintained it with smiles and soft, deceitful manners. We see that this stanza brings into the mind the image of a plant. So here the poet has used a metaphor of a plant for wrath. Just like a plant needs water and sunlight to grow, the anger of the wrath, which turns into vengeance, also needs to be fed with something to grow. So the narrator keeps feeding it with his tears and fears and keeps it alive. He does not disclose his feelings, the honest feelings, to the enemy, and also keeps his anger up, screening it with fake smiles and pretentious behavior. Now the next stanza number 3 says, "And it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright. And my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine." The stanza further intensifies the scene of the situation getting worsened. The narrator talks about how his wrath and the vengeance grew day and night, and as a result bore an apple. We see that the narrator was just creating all of it in his mind only, because he had not disclosed anything to his enemy. So he created it and then cemented it, and everything is going on in his own world. And the one against whom he is fabricating it all is completely unaware of things. He also says that the shine of the fruit was seen by the foe, that is the enemy, who knew that the apple belonged to the narrator. Thus here the narrator furthers the allegory of plant with the increasing wrath, and now the plant has a fruit on it, and fruit has a shine that attracts the enemy's attention and generates temptation in him. The poet here has deliberately kept the fruit as apple, as we know that apple has a biblical reference, and the enemy is attracted to it, now completely ignorant of the fact that it is a fruit of fury. Now let's move on to the last stanza, which reads as, "And into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree." This last stanza states how the enemy stole the apple from the speaker's garden, taking the advantage of the darkness of night. And in the morning, the speaker was happy to see the enemy lying dead underneath the tree. This very stanza shows that the enemy was tempted to the forbidden fruit, and his temptation made him steal it. So the poet does not show the enemy completely innocent here, and as he eats the fruit by stealing it in dark from the narrator, and thereby dies of it. As the fate would have it, the fruit was made of anger, thereby it became poisonous, since anger is a negative emotion, and thus anything made up of it would do nothing but harm. So it killed the enemy. And in the concluding lines, we also see the wickedness and spitefulness of the speaker against the enemy. That when he sees him dead, the speaker feels happy. He feels glad. The wrath overpowers his human sense and humanity, that he feels good at someone's death. The poem ends here, but it gives a very strong message to the society to look within and weigh their actions. Our egos and the affectedness of behaviors that cause suppression of emotions are doing harm to others. Anger is a natural human emotion, but wrath is an intensified form of anger in which violence and vengeance are involved, and it always leads to destruction. So if a person is angry, she can be hurt or annoyed, and it can be momentary, whereas wrath is cultivated silently. Wrath is one of the 7 deadly sins, also the temptation as well. As per the Christian beliefs, and Blake's faith in Christianity is reflected here very clearly. How he explains the consequences of this emotion in human life, the allusion of the forbidden apple of the Garden of Eden reflect his religiosity pretty well. It also suggests the conceitful behavior of the society, which is often encouraged, since the candidness and explicitness of the feelings and emotions is always discouraged, as it is considered less civil. The suppressed feelings and communication causes much harm to people. So the speaker also shapes the anger into wrath and cultivates the anger by watering and sunning it. He disguises it with his smile and fake behavior. And therefore, the wrath his mind was occupying could not be released, and it resulted in tragedy. Whereas the solution to all this was as simple as to communicate well, the way he did to his own friend. The original title of the poem was Christian Forbearance, which means patience, control, and tolerance. But later, he changed the title into the current one. The title has allusions from Bible which alludes to the poison tree of the Eden garden. And here the title of the poem is very well justified, since the feelings of the speaker for the enemy were nothing but full of hostility, vengeance, and hatred, and thus making the tree poisonous. So the bottled up emotions often turn into something poisonous. So the message that the poet is trying to deliver here, that there should be a free flow of emotions and people should learn to forgive others, as he probably does to his own friend who he was angry with. But the coldness and callousness of the speaker in the last lines of the poem, these things are quite alarming for humanity. So communication, forgiveness, and forbearance are the only remedies of this poison which exists within us. And therefore, human beings must look into the conscience and their emotions before they become toxic and lethal. The 16-lined poem contains 4 quatrains, and each quatrain has 2 rhyming couplets. And thus, the rhyme scheme is A-A-B-B. The repeated words like I and in many of the lines, the monosyllabic and bisyllabic words and the use of simple vocabulary, all these make it like a nursery rhyme. So this was all about the poem A Poison Tree. I hope it was comprehensible to you all. Thank you for watching.